Logic dropped Vinyl Days, and I thought it was cool. I listened to this record on stream for the first time. We listened to a bit of it, and yeah, I went and I listened to the rest of it on my own free time, and I'm cool. Like this is nice. This is all right. Listening to this album a couple times gave me the impression that this is the first time that Logic has fully created something that he wanted to make. And I look at it and it just feels wholesome. You know what I'm saying? It feels like a fan of hip hop made a hip hop album, was representing some of his favorite MCs, wanted them to be showcased along with himself, showing him working with some of his childhood heroes. And I think for a lot of people, Logic as an entity, as a rapper, especially when it comes to this album, is very much like that kid that used to be a Superman or a Batman or a Spider-Man fan, and they would put on their costume and run around the house shooting webs or throwing stuff out of their little gadget belt, pretending they could fly. Whatever the case is, just having the time of their lives, emulating their absolute heroes. And I feel like that was Logic on this album. I'm probably wanting to sit in the same room, in the same space as them. I also feel like for a casual Logic fan, or a guy like me who's not really into the stuff that he's been releasing in the last few years, due to that lack of hunger that I've usually been criticizing Logic for, and that lack of inspiration that I feel like he's had over the last couple years, or even just album concepts or album ideas where he goes into these elongated kind of rants about social media or how he's perceived in the public eye, which is understandable, just not necessarily entertaining for a record. Here it just feels like, you know what, I don't have anything to prove. I'm not trying to be the best rapper, and I'm glad I've come away with that understanding after listening to this album, because if he doesn't want to be the best rapper and he just wants to make music and he just wants to be a guy who's near hip hop, even if he is retired or not retired, or I don't even know what the status is anymore, I feel like that's a much healthier, less toxic place for him to be in, because he does go into that a few times on this record. I will talk about that track as well, because I did think it was one of the funnier and more revealing cuts on the album. Immediately looking into it is huge J Dilla inspiration. The skits are everywhere. I'm really only going to talk about some of my favorite cuts off of this album, which pretty much start at around track 6 with Black White Boy. Even though I feel like Logic makes a bit of a mountain out of a molehill by acknowledging that people used to call him the F slur, and how deeply into a form you'd probably have to look to find people who are legitimately unironically calling Logic slurs because he made music that they didn't like. How much work you'd have to go through in order to find the person like that and then take them seriously enough to repeat what they said about you on an album is kind of cringy. But as opposed to being like overly dramatic about it, Logic is somewhat angry on this cut. He is coming back at that type of criticism. He is saying and understanding that he shouldn't take it to heart, and he should have probably never taken it personally. I do like how there is a bit of a dichotomy on the album where Logic is very openly telling you that I had a very shit understanding and mentality of these things as they apply to me, and now I realize that none of that shit even mattered in the first place for the most part. Logic isn't trying to be too cool, he's being himself, and even if himself is corny, it's endearing because it's honest and it's true. Track number 7, Quasi, was an interesting track to me because it very clearly put Logic in the perspective of his own fan base almost, by very passionately rapping back to Madlib to come out of retirement because he wanted to hear his music and he wanted the world to hear his music and just how great he is, while maybe unintentionally creating a parallel with himself, even because Logic was also a rapper who retired himself, and I'm sure his fan base felt the same way about him. I always did feel like it was a little too early for Logic to retire, but I was comfortable with that, knowing that he left on a higher note with no pressure, and never really believed that his retirement would last long. I love the dusty, vintage sound of this album. It really feels straight out of the box, straight off the shelf, straight out of that little container that you would grab from your basement and you put on a record player, and boom, it just just sounds so authentic. I do really like hearing that aesthetic mixed with some really nicely mixed beats. Clouds is probably one of my favorite tracks on this album too. It's a really smooth song with Logic having an incredible flow on this track. Once again, lyrically, Logic is an acceptable or passable lyricist. I'm not expecting anything beyond what he has proven that he's capable of. So I'm not expecting any like crazy bars or even really deep concepts on this album. That's why I say listening to it casually can probably be the best experience that you're gonna have with it. If you go in not really wanting Logic to be the best, instead going in hearing a guy rap who likes hip-hop music. Langston has an equally smooth contribution to this track over this really back in the day breezy colorful sample, and there is a really nice transition for Currency to rap as consistently as he's been rapping his whole career. I really think we need to give Currency his flowers because Jesus, this man has not missed in a very long time for me personally. Rogue One is also another good track on this album where Logic is almost rapping over what I could imagine to be a chase scene out of an early 90s New York movie. He's got just as much urgency and just as much rush as the beat itself. I mean, just picture this track in the background of Juice where Omar Epps and Tupac are running away from the police trying to avoid school. And Logic finally kind of made it up to Royce da 5'9" after his extra Caterpillar performance from back in 2018, I think. 10 Years was probably the best lyrically that Logic was on this album. I Guess I Love It is another beautiful highlight off this album. Games versus Good. Logic's verse is good. Logic having a very nice dichotomy between the way his son is going to be brought up versus how he was brought up. And I do like the perspective that Logic takes on this track where he basically admits that none of the success and the notoriety and the accolades fulfilled him. That's something that he had to go get on his own, realizing that that isn't everything, but still acknowledging that rap doesn't have to be something that is demonized because it isn't something that ultimately ended up fulfilling him long term. It's still something that he has a clear love for. And the transitions on this track specifically are gorgeous. I love this song. And his singing at the end of this track isn't bad either. It's actually pretty good. And Sayonara being the bye-bye basically, obviously, to this record of Logic giving a little bit of extra information, working with legendary producers like No ID. It's really J. Cole-esque the way this album closes out, but for a 30-track album, I really don't mind him shouting out or talking about a bunch of the names and processes that it took to create something like this, because I imagine it wouldn't have been an easy or short process, especially given how many samples there are throughout this album. Outside of that, I do think that this album does good in that the average listener of Logic can come away from this feeling like he is at his best. The average Logic detractor or the average Logic guy who's not that big of a fan or impressed with what he does generally may come away from this with, hey, at least the beat's cool, at least it knocks, at least this reminds me of a great time in hip-hop. But there's something enjoyable for someone on this record, even if they're not a big Logic fan, I feel like, which is kind of my stance. Since I've given up on Logic even being in a top anything list in regards to his skill as a rapper or as an MC, and no, this isn't a diss or an insult to him, it just makes listening to the music more tolerable when you come in with a more casual expectation as opposed to thinking that he's gonna blow you away with bars or anything like that. I wish that was the case, but I'm cool with what I ended up getting. Downsides for this record are definitely the skits. I'm never gonna play these skits again. Some of them are cool. Don't get me wrong, for a first listen, but I'm definitely not going to play them individually from the tracks themselves. The skits aren't memorable in reference to the tracks themselves, in my opinion. I am glad that he didn't integrate the skits into the songs, but if you wanted people so desperately to play the skits, that probably would have been the best way. But since you were courteous enough to separate them, I don't have to listen to it. Funk Flex showing up on this album is so annoying. God damn, I did not expect Flex to be on Dick Ride Mode 3000. He's like DJ Drama on steroids without the likability. For me. He might be great for you. That might be your thing. It's just not for me. Getting to the track Ladanda. I've seen a lot of takes about this track. And what I can say after listening to it again, and this is kind of how I felt during my first listen, is that Logic is painting a very clear dichotomy between the crazy person that he's presenting, who's threatening to essentially want to kill Fantano, and the person that he is now, the more rational human being that realizes opinions are just opinions. The only really weird part about this track is how it almost admits that Logic might still feel this way about Fantano if they never developed a relationship, which I think is incredibly weird and strange to harbor that type of negative emotion to someone who's basically just doing their job, that doesn't know you or probably doesn't think about you in their day-to-day outside of the music that you make. I know his fan base is probably gonna say, well, words can cut deep, but yeah, knives cut deeper. And when you threaten to take someone out, it might leave them with a bit of a sour taste in their mouth. Now, I understand that Logic probably doesn't actually want to body Fantano, which is great. It's just playing up the narrative or the idea for the sake of the song. But I did see a clip of Fantano's reaction to the song, and just like I can't tell Logic how to feel about Fantano's criticism of his music, I can't tell Fantano how to feel about Logic saying that he wanted to kill him on a song. All I can say that in either case is probably not that deep. In regards to Logic threatening Fantano, and in regards to Fantano reviewing his music, is probably not that deep. Anyone saying that Fantano is the reason for Logic's depression or anxiety, and that he had the ability to basically deplatform Logic when Logic has been bigger than him his entire career, I think is looking at this from a very short-sighted and narrow point of view. Considering any music reviewer or person who thinks from an analytical point of view about the art that they consume as basically the person who's gonna make or break the talent is a ridiculous point of view to have and maintain. Because in reality, out of every negative review or thoughts about an artist that I've read from any major publication, any major review platform, Fantano himself, none of those negative reviews have had an impact on that artist's trajectory. So we need to stop feeling like Fantano was ever a threat to Logic's career, because he was. Now, if you want to talk about how Logic felt about the criticism of what Fantano said to him personally, that's fair. But you have to realize that that is all self-imposed. That is basically self-harm. You are going out of your way to interact with someone's negative thoughts about your music and then berating them for just having an opinion about what you release. Again, I'm saying this to Logic's audience. I know Logic probably understands this, but I've seen some crazy defense for this song. As annoying as Fantano's audience might be, they aren't stopping any ship that's meant to sail from sailing. In general, Logic made an over-the-top song to show that he was overreacting to everything that he was hearing, to show how ridiculous it is. It's more of a song where Logic is dissing himself in the way he used to think, more than it is him trying to threaten any reviewer or anything like that. But I'm not gonna pretend like it's not still weird, because it is. Also, one of the skits on this album has like my favorite instrumental, and it's taken up by Aaron Judge. I would have loved for Logic to rap over this track. I don't know why he didn't. That really pissed me off, but it's whatever. All in all though, Logic with Vinyl Days was not a bad project. I think it was actually good. It was cool. I don't know if I think it's good or if it's cool. These are words that almost mean the same thing for me. But I will say that Logic, after his many years making rap music, after his many years in hip hop, he gained a lot more than just a fan base. He gained a lot more than just a lot of money. He gained a solid relationship with the people he used to consider his heroes. And I think that is the thing that he values most and wanted to showcase on this record. And for that wholesome idea, I can't knock it. You know what I'm saying? I can't knock the tracks on here that I wasn't a fan of, are just boring, repety rap tracks where Logic isn't saying anything, but just going on and on with this old, tired flow. It's, like I said, most of the time the flow works, but when it doesn't, the tracks are painfully boring. And I also wish he would stop talking about crypto, bro, because I know you niggas that are in crypto are down bad right now, bro. Look at Bitcoin. Look at all the other crypto. Bro, you're down. Okay, bro, you can't convince me that, unlike me or any other nigga who saw the opportunity that crypto was giving niggas in 2020 to dip their pinky toe in, make a ton of money, and then get out before it crashed, you can't convince me that you up now, because I know you're not. I just know you're not. In crypto bars 2022. Y'all let me know how you felt about this Logic album. I thought it was cool, good. Yeah, that's really how I feel about it. Until next time, we out. Bye.